out in looking at our national security strategy, how the UK security establishment could meet its commitments in a variety of theatres, the European, the Middle Eastern, the Indo-Pacific, and some enduring commitments it still has in some other parts of the world. So we have three excellent panelists to examine in detail this theme, and I'll invite first to the podium the Minister of National Defence of the Republic of Korea. Thank you, sir.
Distinguished guests, it is my great pleasure to join defense ministers and security experts from all over the world here at the internationally recognized Shangri-La Dialogue, one of the largest security conferences in the world. Allow me to offer my special thanks to IISS Director General and Chief Executive Dr. John Chipman and his team, and Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Singapore, His Excellency Teo Chee-hean, for their many efforts to resume the Shangri-La Dialogue following a 2-year hiatus from the COVID pandemic. I am excited to deliver a speech on the denuclearization of North Korea and the security of the Indo-Pacific region at this profound occasion. Our government of the Republic of Korea that newly took office last month has laid out a global pivotal state initiative to play a responsible role for freedom, peace, and prosperity beyond the Korean Peninsula to the Indo-Pacific region and the world. Distinguished guests, let me take this opportunity to share with you the security landscape on the Korean Peninsula and the Indo-Pacific region, as well as the role of the Republic of Korea as a global pivotal state. Today, the Indo-Pacific region is drawing the attention of the entire world. The Indo-Pacific is home to half of the world population, accounting for 2/3 of international trade. Major military powers around the world are also located in the region. And as such, nations of the region, including European countries, are seeking to enhance their presence in the Indo-Pacific through various economic and security consultative mechanisms. In such circumstances, instability in the Indo-Pacific region can leave an enormous impact on global economy and international security order. Furthermore, Republic of Korea's political, economic, and cultural status, as well as the distinctive geopolitical character of the Korean Peninsula, are inseparable from the stability in the Indo-Pacific region. This means instability on the Korean Peninsula can lead to instability in Northeast Asia and in the overall Indo-Pacific region. The international community pointed out North Korea's nuclear and missile program as one of the major challenges that destabilize the Indo-Pacific and is closely coordinating to head off such challenges. The ROK-US alliance is also dedicating its utmost efforts, leveraging all available efforts and assets to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Yet, unfortunately, North Korea is behaving in a way that betrays our expectations. And now, its nuclear and missile threats have become more than a simple threat. From short-range to intercontinental ballistic missiles, North Korea's repeated missile provocations are advancing in quantity and quality, not to mention its preparations to conduct the 7th nuclear test. This is a grave challenge, threatening peace and stability of not only the Korean Peninsula and the Indo-Pacific region, but also the international community. North Korea's nuclear and missile provocations are clear violations of UN Security Council resolutions that the international community agreed upon and breaking existing agreements from the Inter-Korean and US DPRK summits. If North Korea continues its provocations, the security of Northeast Asia and the region will be further destabilized, which will also negatively affect the stability of the Indo-Pacific. Meanwhile, our government will not give up its goal to establish peace on the Korean Peninsula through the denuclearization of North Korea. Our goal to denuclearize North Korea in a complete, verifiable manner, and our principle to establish a sustainable peace on the Korean Peninsula will remain firm and robust. To this end, we will set forth clear, corresponding measures with the international community to pursue the denuclearization of North Korea. And to echo President Yoon's remarks, should North Korea make substantial progress in denuclearization throughout the course of such endeavors, our government will pursue a bold plan that can yield groundbreaking improvements for North Korea's economy and its citizens' quality of life. With that said, we need to support all this plan from a position of strength. And to this end, our government will strengthen capabilities to better implement the U.S. extended deterrence and will dramatically enhance response capabilities of the Republic of Korea military to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. And moreover, we seek to strengthen ROK-US-Japan trilateral security cooperation to respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. While many bilateral issues remain unresolved between the Republic of Korea and Japan, we not only intend to have the two sides put their wisdom together to reach reasonable solutions in a way that is in line with the two countries' shared interests, but also intend to engage in a serious dialogue with Japan, not just to normalize ROK-Japan security cooperation, but also to strengthen ROK-US-Japan trilateral security cooperation. And as a matter of fact, we held our first ROK-US-Japan trilateral defense ministerial meeting in 2 years and 7 months. During our trilateral meeting, we mainly discussed options to respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. We also held our first ROK-PRC defense ministerial meeting in 2 years and 7 months. Both sides pledged to work together for new ROK-PRC relations based on spirits of mutual respect and cooperation. In particular, the two sides shared a common view in the need to enhance strategic communication for peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. During the ROK-US summit last May, our government announced that Korea will formulate its own Indo-Pacific strategy framework. And through this announcement, the Republic of Korea made it clear that it will now go beyond its diplomacy that was focused on Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asian affairs to play its necessary role as a global pivotal state. This is not a nearsighted response. Rather, it is a commitment aimed at playing a global role, with a firm ground on our long-term vision. And to this end, allow me to elaborate, as a defense minister, several initiatives for our government's regional security contribution. First, security cooperation with ASEAN is an important key agenda for our government. Therefore, we will expand cooperation in more domains more proactively while respecting ASEAN's centrality. We will dedicate our efforts so that our government's participation in multilateral consultative bodies, including ADMM+, ARF, and Shangri-La Dialogue, can result in tangible contributions. To this end, we will engage in joint response against non-traditional security threats, such as cyber threats and terrorism, threats that ASEAN is facing in reality. Also, we will look into defense industry cooperation and other various options together to strengthen maritime security capabilities with ASEAN member states. Second, our government is a key partner for security cooperation, forging partnership with multiple nations of the region, including European countries, and as such will proactively expand cooperation with all nations on and off the region that seek to cooperate with us, not only for traditional areas of security cooperation such as maritime security, but also for non-traditional areas of security cooperation. And third, based on principles of openness, transparency, and inclusiveness, we seek to expand cooperation with various security consultative bodies that are currently active in the Indo-Pacific region. We can say that ultimate purpose of unilateral and multilateral consultative bodies, such as FROC-ASEAN Cooperation and Quad, is to faithfully implement rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific region. The Republic of Korea will seek to play a constructive role as a global pivotal state, so that rather than ruling out a certain country, it can unlock the greatest amount of security benefits for the greatest number of countries. Even as of right now, the level of tensions on the Korean Peninsula remains higher than any other place in the world, with continued confrontations between South and North Korea. And put in this situation, we cannot help but have mixed feelings as we watch the reality of Ukraine unfold. An invasion cannot be justified under any circumstances. I sincerely hope peace can return again to Ukraine soon. I also hope North Korea can promptly cease its nuclear and missile program so that real peace can be established on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you for listening.
Minister, thank you very much for giving us a sense of the new government's approach to the challenge of DPRK's nuclear weapons program, and I'm sure there will be questions from the audience as to what diplomacy and in what format should be conducted to contain and then ultimately diminish and entirely disarm DPRK's nuclear weapons program, which does indeed have impact throughout the world, not just in the Korean Peninsula or in this region. With that, could I invite the Minister of the Netherlands to address this plenary of the Shangri-La Dialogue? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chipman. Dear colleagues, generals, admirals, all participants of the Shangri-La Dialogue, it's an honor and a privilege to speak to you today, to discuss common challenges for the Indo-Pacific, and to exchange views with academics and professional analysts at this important geopolitical forum. It's of course also a great pleasure to be here in Singapore on this occasion after 2 years of COVID pandemic. This dialogue is taking place again more or less like we were used to do. And I say more or less because my friend and dear colleague, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Mr. Josep Borrell, regrettably cannot be here. He would like to deliver his remarks here on the podium with us, but due to COVID, he's had to cancel his appearance here this morning, and he has asked me to deliver also his key messages. And of course, as an EU member state, and also as a fierce supporter of his views on the global role of the EU, I am just proud to do so. First of all, let me thank IISS and Singapore for giving me this opportunity to speak here today, and also, of course, for your hospitality in organizing this event. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in interesting times, and that is meant as ironically as it sounded. I'm also glad that the IISS asked us to speak about common challenges for Asia-Pacific and European defense, because that is indeed the right framing. Europe and Asia have a shared stake in each other's security. Putin's territorial war shows how our continents are connected. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a global challenge with global ramifications. And these ramifications bring global responsibilities. Neutrality is not possible. Furthermore, Europe is drawing lessons from the war against Ukraine. This makes European countries and the EU better partners for Asia too. And let me start with condemning this illegal and unprovoked aggression, invasion of Ukraine, by a UN Security Council member. This invasion has changed the global security situation fundamentally. There is no far away. A war in one part of the world affects people across the globe. The war in Ukraine has already affected all of us, also people far beyond the European continent. From scarce energy supplies and rising prices to bare shelves in our supermarkets. And if we fail to secure the export of Ukraine's grain and its harvest that's coming on, the entire world will have to face grave consequences as a food crisis looms. The whole world risks stagflation, global security, and the global economy are at risk. And all because of Putin's war. The demolition of Ukraine's critical infrastructure, including grain silos, the blockade of Odessa, it's all due to the war, not to our sanctions. So what's at stake? The same rules for all, based on international law within the UN Charter at its core. It makes states secure, people free, and companies willing to invest. In short, our rule-based way of life, that's what's at stake. And we must protect it together. The way the international community now chooses to respond will not only affect the stability and security in Europe, but it will determine the future of the rules-based international order of freedom and prosperity across the globe. Speaking out together is crucial to protect these common values. Development in the Indo-Pacific region also have growing impact on our global prosperity and collective security. As the oceans are the arteries of the global economy, the Indo-Pacific region is crucial in this regard. The seas need to be freely accessible to all, and that requires action by all of us collectively to uphold rule-based international order. We have begun to look beyond our own region, and we're ready to face the reality that regional threat landscapes are increasingly connected across borders, across continents. A paradigm shift has taken place towards recognizing global threats using a 360 degrees approach. Threats countries in Asia have been facing more consciously. Your experience can thus provide us with valuable lessons, also in Europe, because we are indeed drawing lessons. Putin has brought us together as never before. European countries have stepped up their game to provide security against present and future threats. And his actions have woken up the EU to its geopolitical role and the importance of defense cooperation. The EU has adopted the strategic compass as our operational guide to develop the EU into a stronger and more capable security provider. European nations are increasing their defense budgets. All this will make European armed forces stronger, but it will also make us better partners for security cooperation with Asia. Last year, our Dutch frigate, Everton, was part of the UK carrier strike group, and she also docked here in Singapore. Her presence is a demonstration to our commitment to the region and our readiness to defend our shared values and interests. And we plan to send a ship to the Indo-Pacific region once every 2 years to show our commitment. And I see how much great potential for cooperation there is in this rapidly changing and sometimes disruptive world. Open and accessible cyberspace is crucial for our trade and communication. But cyberspace is haunted by pirates and mines too. We should respond by fiercely working together to protect it. The EU Indo-Pacific strategy provides a foundation upon which to work with our Indo-Pacific partners, also in the field of security. Work is underway, but we have to make it as concrete as possible. In a world where not everyone plays by the same rules, countries from Europe and throughout the Indo-Pacific need each other and should work together to uphold a world based on agreed rules and international laws, not might make right. In closing, as I said, we're living in interesting times, less ironically perhaps this time. Power structures are shifting and power bases are broadening. Our efforts to protect our common values and to promote stability and security are more effective when done together. And I say this also on behalf of my colleague Josep Borrell and on behalf of the European Union. In the face of the current armed aggression, neutrality is not an option. No one wishes to see similar aggression beyond Europe in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister, for those remarks, for reminding us that the regional threat landscapes are increasingly connected. When the President of the EU Commission took her office, she referred to her wish to make it a geopolitical commission. There were perhaps early doubts as to whether that could be effectively operated, but there's no question now that the EU is playing a very geopolitical role and often commission-led. And glad also that you were able to weave into your remarks some of the thoughts of the High Representative Josep Borrell, who very sadly couldn't be with us today, but I hope you will relay back to him personally our hope. Espero que su recuperación sería rápido. We hope that his recovery will be fast. And you mentioned in your concluding passages that your Dutch ship joined the UK carrier strike force when it made its tour of the region. I think an indicator of a general policy attitude that the European presence in the Indo-Pacific is best offered in a combined and joint effort where possible. And so with that, could I invite Lord Sedwill to address this plenary. Thank you very much.
John, colleagues, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you and address you this morning. Can I also, as a British parliamentarian, extend my thanks also to the government and people of Singapore for a warm and generous welcome as we've returned to the IISS Shangri-La Dialogue in person this year, the first of its kind for a couple of years, as we've heard. It's very good to be here. Thank you. When I first became National Security Advisor, in my first year in that job, I visited Beijing more often than I visited Washington, and I visited Japan, the Republic of Korea, Singapore, India, Australia, and New Zealand more than I visited some European nations. Now, that wasn't just because of Brexit, although Brexit Britain, of course, had to be global Britain to prosper, and to do so, we had to deepen our relationships in this part of the world, which, as we've already heard, amounts to half the global population, over a third of the global economy, 2/3 of global trade. But it was also because the acute political crisis, geopolitical crisis of that time was, once again, the DPRK, at the time developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, which they could apply a nuclear warhead to, that could have reached the continental United States and the clear risks of nuclear escalation that arose from that. You might ask why a British national security advisor was so involved in that issue. Well, apart from our role as a member of the Security Council, those of you who've done geography will remember the world is round, and Berlin is closer to Pyongyang than Seattle. London is closer than Los Angeles. It was perhaps the most acute example of how a geopolitical crisis in this part of the world is also a geopolitical crisis and threat in the European theatre. And as we've heard already from the Dutch Defence Minister and others over the past couple of days, the geopolitical crisis from the Russian aggression in Ukraine risks causing geopolitical crises elsewhere through the transmission mechanism of food and energy insecurity. Nations in the Middle East, in Africa, and in Asia are highly dependent upon Ukrainian and Russian grain and food oils for their own food security. That is not just a question for them of inflation, but of shortages. And as we know, food shortages lead to political instability. We've seen the same, of course, with COVID and with climate change. The G7 panel on global economic resilience that I chaired in 2021 concluded that the next major crisis is as likely to arise from a combination of environmental, socio-economic, and geopolitical shocks as it is from a single source crisis like the COVID crisis. If national security 1.0 of the 20th century was essentially the defense of the nation, and by the way, that's become more complex in the modern era because we don't just have the traditional domains of land, sea, and air, but the new domains of space, cyberspace, and the information space. And national security 2.0 added to that the need to tackle non-state threats such as terrorism, transnational crime, and subversion. Then national security 3.0, as we face now, adds to those challenges environmental, economic, and human security for the reasons that we've set out. Now, there is a temptation, and many populists succumb to this, that the answer to the alignment between our national security interests and global security interests is to reverse course, reduce interdependencies, pull up the drawbridge, turn back the clock, retreat from globalization, drift towards protectionism, with the inevitable result of fragmentation and, as we've already heard, economic stagflation. As the panel I chaired concluded, improving economic resilience requires two things: sound economic policies at home to promote growth, productivity, investment, and skills, plus collective action to tackle market concentrations, weaknesses in supply chains, and overdependence. And that includes, as we go through the green transition over the next quarter century to achieve net zero by the middle part of this century. It would be a mistake to replace overdependence on fossil fuels with overdependence on single sources for the critical minerals and other capabilities that we're going to require for the technological revolution and the green transition. And the measures we'll need to take will be of a scale and scope similar to those we needed to take after the OPEC crises of the 1970s. Those same 2 points apply to defence and national security. We need to strengthen our national capabilities and act collectively and effectively together. We've heard a lot, including from the American Defense Secretary yesterday, about partnership. But partnership must mean partnership. That means sharing the burden, not simply sheltering under the capabilities of others. I was involved in producing the UK's National Security Capability Review of 2017, and although it came out after my time at the beginning of the Integrated Review of 2021. And the headline of that, as we've heard, was a tilt to the Indo-Pacific. But underlying that tilt were some quite important new concepts. The fusion doctrine, whereby a country like the UK applies our defence, diplomatic, development and economic capabilities, national capabilities, to our defence, diplomatic, economic goals and aims and interests, and the allied by design concept, which we saw vividly with the deployment of CSG, the Carrier Strike Group, in 2021, that for a nation, still the fifth largest defense budget in the world, but a nation that is always going to operate with allies, we need to design that concept in from the start. And we saw that with the deployment of the Carrier Strike Group, as we've heard, with Dutch, Japanese, Australian, American, and other forces deployed as part of it. The G7 panel also concluded that in order to facilitate a collective approach, we needed to show real solidarity among allies and partners. And that means more self-discipline. Not using national security measures in our domestic trade and investment legislation against allies. Operating more collectively and effectively in the global institutions, including the global institutions that govern the world economy. And acting together against economic crises or economic coercion. Some nations that have faced that have felt pretty lonely over the past few years. There are important dividing lines, but the important dividing line is not between authoritarian and democratic states, vital though those distinctions are. We're only going to form genuinely deep alliances and partnerships with countries that share our values. But we can do business and find common cause with countries with very different political systems. The key is not the distinction between democracies and authoritarian governments, but between those who accept the global rule of law, respect the sovereignty of smaller nations, and those, like Vladimir Putin, who operate the law of the jungle and infringe them. In this region, we've heard from both the United States and China. And we heard yesterday from the Australian Defence Minister of how they intend to approach their relationship with the People's Republic. There are significant differences between us. There are areas that, as Western democracies, we will have to contest. There are many areas in a free and open Indo-Pacific where free and open competition is the right approach. But there are other areas where it is vital that we cooperate, notably on the major environmental challenges of our time. In the same year that the UK hosted the COP26 conference on climate change, China hosted as important a conference on biodiversity, which could be the next big threat to food security. Whatever phrase you want to give that, détente with Chinese characteristics, we knew peaceful coexistence, we need to find a way of doing business with each other. The UK is committed to this region. I'm no longer in government, but the UK is genuinely committed to this region because it is in our national interest. And that commitment is persistent. We will be deploying more forces into this region in order to support our interests and those of our allies. We will continue to conduct freedom of navigation operations, joint and combined exercises with partners here, counter-piracy operations, sanctions enforcement, and alongside that, political engagement within the UN. We're also seeking to deepen our economic ties by acceding to the CPTPP, and I'm told the negotiations for that are going well. There is a question about whether more formal structures need to be reinforced as well. We've heard already that a nation NATO is not appropriate to this part of the world, but that isn't the only model. And we can refresh the Five Powers Defence Agreement. We have the new agreement, AUKUS, between the UK, US and Australia. We have the UK's new structured dialogue with ASEAN. And there are other fora as well, the Quad and others that we have already heard. Another feature of our presence in this region is a new approach to industrial and defence technical cooperation. In the past, we've tended to develop systems for our own needs and in our own theatre, and then seek to sell them to partners and allies around the world. We're moving to a new approach of genuine co-design and co-production, including with allies and partners in this part of the world. A couple of examples: the work with Australia on the Type 26. And with Japan on the Future Combat Air System. So, John, in answer to the exam question of this session, I agree with you. These are not just common challenges in the sense that they're the same but in separate parts of the world. These are common challenges because they are connected. We need to take collective action on the geopolitical, economic, and environmental threats and challenges. We need a common approach between allies and partners to reinforcing our defence and security cooperation with trade and investment relationships. We need collective investment in genuine partnership, co-designed and co-produced defence and technical capabilities. And we need a common resolve to protect and promote our shared values and interests in a period which, as we've already heard, can be described best as, or most moderately perhaps, as a period of interesting times. Final point I'd make is this. One capability that we genuinely have is our alliances and partnerships. And it's not one our adversaries enjoy. It's important we nurture that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, for bringing out the geoeconomic elements of geostrategy, the importance of the right kind of economic statecraft, weaving in the climate change impact on national and international security, and finally reminding us, if I can coin this phrase, of the need for smart partnership. With that, let's turn to some questions and comments from the floor. I have a dozen or so. I will ask 6 or 7 of them to start and then perhaps come back to the panel. Could I begin with Bastian Giegowitz from Germany and the IISS? Bastian.
John, thank you very much. My question is for the two speakers from the NATO nations. In 2.5 weeks or so, NATO will adopt, presumably, a new strategic concept. What will, should, can it credibly say about the Indo-Pacific in the context of Russia's war of aggression in Europe and the persistent threat that Russia poses to European and Euro-Atlantic security? Thank you.
Thanks very much. And from Malaysia, Chu Ping Hu.
Thank you, Dr. Chairman. So I would like to ask about the Smart Power Partnership. To Minister of Defense Lee Jong-suk, I'm glad to hear that there is going to be a defense cooperation with ASEAN member states. So you mentioned about more domains to be included. Would you consider peace process on the Korean Peninsula to be part of this expanding security cooperation domain? And to Lord Sedwill, would the UK's Indo-Pacific tilt be a form of converged interest with South Korea's Indo-Pacific tilt as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from India, Krishnan Nair.
Many East Asian leaders often express the view, not in public but in Chatham House settings, that the competition, the ongoing competition and rivalry between the United States and China in the Asian theater give them more flexibility, wiggle room, and choices. This is a luxury which countries in this region did not have during the old Cold War Soviet years. For them at that time, Moscow was definitely the other side. Would the panel factor in this situation among the common challenges for Asia Pacific in the context of European defense interests?
Thank you very much. And from the Republic of Korea, Wong Gi-cho.
Thank you. I would like to ask a question to Korean Defense Minister, Mr. Lee. As you mentioned, President Yoon announced at the summit meeting with Joe Biden last month that he will formulate Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy, and you emphasized that Korean government will increase security engagement in the Indo-Pacific, which has been a missing link in Korea's regional policy in the past. So my question is to you, what would be the major security components of Korea's new Indo-Pacific strategy, especially with regard to regional security issues such as South China Sea? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And from Australia, Natasha Kassam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chipman, and thanks to all the panelists today. My question is for Minister Lee. We've heard in great detail over the past day and a half the views of the Chinese, American, and Japanese ministers about Taiwan. I'd like to ask you about how Korea sees Taiwan's security and what role Taiwan will play in Korea's new independence.
I mean, you could, like, stay behind this, right?